Welcome to the latest edition of Nick's Yemen Roundup, covering the period between 28 July and 3 August 2025. You are listening to the man himself, Nick J. Brumfield. Before we get started, just a bit about myself. I have an MA in Arab Studies from Georgetown University and a decade's experience analyzing Middle East politics. Specifically those in Yemen, but also throughout the region, including the Gulf states, Jordan, and elsewhere. I'm regularly quoted in international media, specifically as it relates to the Yemen conflict, and have a extensive experience in project and data management, GIS capabilities, political risk, business intelligence, and legal consulting. So all of this is to say that if you like my work on Yemen or anything else of mine that you see, and you're interested in contracting with me for some work, or just other professional contacts, media inquiries, that kind of thing, feel free to reach out to me at info.nickjbrumfield@gmail.com. If you're unable to do that, that's not a problem at all. Just don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video or any of the other videos of mine that you'd like, so that other people can see it, and hopefully some word can get out about the work that I'm doing. But thank you so much for bearing with that commercial there. Let's go ahead and get started with what people are actually here for, which is what is going on in Yemen this week, starting off, as always, with politics and governance, and specifically international affairs. Not as much going on this week as the last week, which we covered 2 weeks last week, mostly as it relates to the Yemeni government. So we did see a lot of movement by various Yemeni government officials this past week. Foreign Minister Dr. Shayal Zindani was in New York City this week, between 28 and 30 July, roughly, to attend the two-state conference on Palestine. During that time, he met on the sidelines of that with Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Vershinin, I believe, as well as the UK Minister of State for the Middle East and North Africa. He also did, on 29 July, meet with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres and discuss the ongoing sort of crisis in Yemen and the peace process. We did see Deputy Foreign Minister Mustafa Noman attend the Somalia Contact Group meeting in Doha, during which time he met with Saudi Deputy Foreign Minister. Not too much to report out from that, just ongoing engagement between the two parties. We did see continued engagement from a variety of great powers with the Yemeni government this past week. 29 July, we did see Interior Minister Ibrahim Haydan meet with U.S. Charge d'Affaires Jonathan Paicha. We did see on 3 August, Paicha did meet in person with Presidential Leadership Council Chairman Rashad Al-Alimi in Riyadh. Alimi just recently returned to Riyadh after almost 2 months in Aden. That was the longest stint that he has spent in Yemen since being appointed chairman of the Presidential Leadership Council in mid-2022. But he's back in Riyadh ostensibly to try to mobilize international support for the Yemeni government, and Paicha did meet with him. We did see Chinese delegation led by the Chinese Charge d'Affaires to Yemen, Xiao Cheng, in Aden this past week, where he met with a number of officials, but most notably including Presidential Leadership Council member Idris Al-Zubaydi, which that meeting is pictured here on the right, as well as Minister of Trade Ashwal. We've seen a number of engagements between, in particular, China and the Yemeni government Ministry of Trade over the course of the last several months. Just an interesting thing that stuck out to me, not too much to report with regards to there, but China, of course, has always been attempting to position itself as be a major contributor to the reconstruction of Yemen if and when there is a peace deal, or some kind of resolution to the conflict. And so it's interesting to see them engage with the Ministry of Trade and Industry. We also did see on 1 August, Yemeni government Prime Minister Salim bin Barak had a call with UK Ambassador to Yemen Abdul Sharif, in which they discussed the UK's extensive recent support to Yemen, including helping organize a donor summit for the health sector, to hopefully to be held in Aden, I believe, as well as continued UK technical support on a number of issues. Moving on over to politics and governance from the Yemeni government perspective, we did see some interesting developments this past week. A lot of people after Rashad Al-Alimi's departure from Aden in recent weeks, we did see Presidential Leadership Council, the UAE-backed aligned members of the Presidential Leadership Council, Idris al-Zubaydi, as well as Abu Zara al-Mahrami, who are also leaders within the Southern Transitional Council. So we have seen them conducting a variety of meetings in Aden. On 28 July, we did see PLC member and STC Vice President Mahrami meet with the Minister of Al-Qaf, Shabiba, in Aden to discuss ongoing Islamic affairs, that kind of thing. Mahrami is a noted Salafi militia commander, more or less. So it is noted that he's sort of engaging in that file, the Islamic affairs file. We also did see Mahrami have a phone call with PLC member and other STC Vice President Farag al-Bahassani, who was former governor of Hadramawt. And there's been a lot of protests in Hadramawt this past week. We'll talk about it on the next slide. But he did have a phone call with Bahassani, who's been recovering, I believe, from a surgery in Germany recently, as well as 2nd Military Region Commander Bargash. 2nd Military Region is the region in charge of coastal Hadramawt, where most of these protests have been taking place, kind of monitoring the situation there. We did see on 28 July, Prime Minister bin Barak issued a decree forming the Supreme Committee for the State General Budgets for 2026, which is hopefully going to help formulate the first Yemeni government budget in several years now. Bin Barak is the former finance minister of the Yemeni government, so he's definitely very much kind of one of those technocrat accountant types who really likes to get things in a line, and hopefully he can bring some of that expertise to the getting that budget together, which again the Yemeni government finances are not great in terms of where stuff's going, but also in terms of revenues, but also in terms of just getting everything on paper about where stuff is going. Just recently, we did see the Central Bank of Yemen and Aden Governor Ahmed al-Muabaki state that something like 75% of Yemeni government revenues are going to places other than the Central Bank of Yemen and Aden, which is where most of them I think are supposed to go. And it's just very difficult to sort of see where everything's going. A lot of suspected corruption, that kind of thing. On 30 July, we did see bin Barak also chair a cabinet meeting in Aden and discussed fiscal policy with the Central Bank of Yemen and Aden, which has been pushing pretty aggressively, in particular on the Yemeni Riyal exchange rate, which we'll talk about during the economic section of the call quite a bit. We did see on 30 July, separately, not together, but separately, PLC member Zubaydi, Prime Minister bin Mubarak, and PLC member Mahrami each held a meeting with Yemeni government military leadership, including most notably Chief of Staff Sahir bin Aziz, as well as a representative, I believe is Abdul Ilah al-Zaidani, perhaps, from the Saudi Task Force 802. This notable because Sagir bin Aziz is normally based up in Marib. He's not often in Aden, so the fact that he's in Aden is notable. It's also notable that all of these meetings, including one that Chief of Staff Lieutenant General bin Aziz held on 31 July among Yemeni government military leadership, was notably not attended by Minister of Defense Mohsen Daeri. So not sure if that means anything, but he just was not present. We did see on 2 August, Prime Minister bin Barak order a comprehensive price oversight campaign by Yemeni government authorities, and they've been sending a lot of messages to local authorities all across Yemeni government-held areas to essentially institute some form of price controls. As we've seen the Yemeni government Riyal significantly appreciate against the US dollar. Just in the course of a week, it went from something like 3,000 against the dollar, or almost 3,000 against the dollar, to something like 1,800 against the dollar. So it's really, really drastically improved its value. And so they're saying that, okay, all the traders need to bring their prices down to conform with that. There's back and forth about whether that's a good idea, but we did see bin Barak meet with the Minister of Industry, Ashwal, to discuss price supervision in Aden on 2 August, which is what that picture there on the right is. We did see a number of continued protests in Yemeni government-held areas, notably in Aden, the Judges Club, the kind of Judges Union, has been conducting a strike against what it calls, the punitive measures by the Supreme Judicial Council against their members trying to mobilize essentially for union, to get, better socioeconomic rights seems to be the main contention there. We did see on 4 August, Zubeidi and Mahrami both held a meeting with the Supreme Judicial Council leadership amid this strike that has seemingly paralyzed the courts in Aden. And saying you need to resolve this in keeping with all legal sort of procedures and that kind of thing. But we'll see. But really, the big story to come out of Yemeni government areas this week, as with regards to protests, is the large-scale protests in Mukalla, which have been going on for the last several months now. But we first saw the indication of these protests in roughly around June, is my first records of them. But we really saw them escalate to a level that we don't always see in Yemeni government-held areas. In late July, 27 July, up until the end of the reporting period here, 3 to 4 August, seemingly today, that they are still ongoing, very large-scale protests in Mukalla after, extended power outages. We're talking 12 hours at a time. I read one report that said that there was one mostly uninterrupted period of 40 hours of outage. But yeah, protesters, they're blocking major roads. The trucks aren't able to move. Shops are closed. They're blocking the port. Mukalla Port's a major port, or at least they were. They broke into sort of the power plant and various government complexes, and are blocking sort of tankers and other things to try to essentially pressure, I guess, the Yemeni government to do something about this. We reported on this sort of product before. We've seen many similar protests in Aden and Mukalla over the years. Most of the time, they're not this level of intensity. These really got people's attention in terms of a level of militancy and what they were sort of going for. And so, yeah, we did see them eventually spread. So they spread to Wadi Hadramawt by 29 July, where we did see on 31 July security forces kill a protester. So that really sort of hiked up the temperature quite a bit. We have seen reports of other security forces at other locations firing on protesters. So this is kind of a big deal. They are demanding, it's kind of it's not necessarily totally anti-system protest, but they are basically saying it's not just about electricity outages. It's about what protesters are calling are years of corruption and mismanagement, and they are demanding the governor Mabhut bin Mahdi, who's been governor since a similar protest movement ousted Hadramawt Governor Farag al-Bahsani in mid-2022. They're wanting him out, or at least some people are saying they're wanting him out. And as of 30 July, pro-Islah sources at least stated that Saudi Arabia has put Governor bin Mahdi under house arrest pending his removal. The Saudis had already kind of soured on bin Mahdi in recent months. They've been keeping him in Riyadh since April, I believe, amid reports that he's kind of perceived as getting too close to Emirati factions who are mostly in control of the Hadramawt coast. We'll see that a journalist was arrested on unspecified charges in Mukalla amid this, which drawing quite a bit of international attention. So this is a continuation of a cycle that we've seen many times in Yemen, but it's also much more intense. And there's also a lot of other stuff going on in Hadramawt right now. So obviously there's that ongoing tension between the Southern Transitional Council, which mostly is on the coast, and the Saudi-backed which is backed by the UAE, and then the Saudi-backed Hadramawt Tribal Alliance, which is kind of straddles the coast in Wadi Hadramawt. So we've seen tensions between them, and them possibly escalating against one another. These protests are kind of orthogonal to those. It's not like they're completely unrelated, but like this seems to be a much more grassroots protest movement, and everybody's kind of scrambling to try to figure out a way to respond to them and leverage them and direct the blame against other people. So you'll see anti-STC media reporting that protesters are tearing down STC banners. You'll see, STC media saying that, the Islah-aligned security forces are the ones that killed a protester in Tarim. We shall see. I don't imagine this is going to expand to the kind of nationwide protests that we saw in 2021. which, according to some people, almost brought down the Yemeni government, particularly as the Yemeni Riyal exchange rate is significantly improving. So some of the structural factors that could have led to this being a much larger thing seems to be pushing against a nationwide protest. That said, it's probably likely we're going to see Hadramawt Governor Mabhut bin Mahdi arrested or brought out soon enough. Not arrested, replaced, sorry. In terms of politics and governance in Houthi movement-held areas, really the big story there's kind of two big stories this week. One is actually more of a Yemeni government story, but it's Houthi aligned. So we did see between 30 and 31 July, Yemeni government authorities released Sheikh Mohammed al-Zaidi to Sana'a. So this was the guy who was arrested at the border between Yemeni government-held Mahra Governorate and Oman several weeks ago. This led to clashes that resulted between tribal militants and local Yemeni government-aligned security forces that killed several Yemeni government-aligned security commanders. So he had been taken to Riyadh and kind of imprisoned. We did see his kind of tribal affiliates in Houthi-held areas hold very large rallies and sort of essentially give the Yemeni government an ultimatum to release him before they did something. So we did see the Yemeni government seemingly give in to that, and they did release him to much fanfare in Houthi-held areas. So they had a big reception to receive him in Jalf Governorate when he came over across the land border between Houthi and Yemeni government-held areas, and then they had a big reception for him in Sana'a, which you can see here. This is actually the second Houthi kind of aligned figure who has been released by Yemeni government-aligned authorities after being arrested in recent weeks. We did see Hisham Sharaf, who's the former Houthi-aligned foreign minister, was detained at Aden International Airport before being released, I believe, last week. So what's going on, if I had to bet, was that the Houthis are threatening to do various different things to the Yemeni government, using their many drones or missiles or et cetera, if they don't release these people, and they are. I mean, that seems the most plausible story. But yeah, in other news, we did see on 31 July, Abdul Malik al-Houthi give his weekly address. Kind of his weekly sermon is kind of how I describe it. During that, he did warn Yemeni-government-aligned factions in southern Yemen against allying with Israel in mid reports and talk of like, oh yeah, the Yemeni government would like to sort of launch an offensive against the Houthis amid the group's ongoing conflict with Israel and increased shipping attacks in the Red Sea, or at least saying that they're going to increase shipping attacks in the Red Sea. And the other kind of major story this week concerns the Houthis' kind of crackdown, whether you could even call it a crackdown, because they've already cracked down quite a bit on their ostensible allies in their Sana'a coalition, the General People's Congress. So we did see on 31 July, a Houthi-aligned court sentenced Ahmed Ali Saleh to death for collaboration. So Ahmed Ali Saleh is the son of late Yemeni President Ali Abdullah Saleh, who the Houthis killed in 2017. They used to be allies, and then the Houthis killed him in December 2017, and that was a major turning point. And then Ahmed Ali Saleh fled, or had been, I think, he had been, I think, in the UAE that time. But during that time, Tariq Saleh fled from Sana'a, and it switched sides to the Yemeni government-aligned side. But essentially, this is a mostly symbolic sentence since Ahmed Ali Saleh hasn't been to Sana'a in like 10 years or something. So a lot going on there. I mean, not a whole lot, physically going on there, but this comes in the context of seemingly the Houthis cracking down on the GPC. So in the security section, we'll talk about how they're ostensibly kidnapped the head of the GPC, Sadiq Abu Ras, in Sana'a this past week, and Ahmed Ali Saleh. The GPC, the General People's Congress, is the former ruling party of Yemen under Ali Abdullah Saleh, so it's seen as like the old regime, I guess. And although they're ostensibly allies, the Houthis have been following these people around with guns very closely for like 10 years now, and basically keeping them on a very tight leash. That said, on 2 August, we did see the Houthi-aligned parliament reportedly begin its annual session, or its session under Speaker Yahya al-Rai. And during that, they praised Abdul Malik al-Houthi and everything that he does. So yeah, in terms of actual political contestation within Houthi held areas, there's not a whole lot of it. The Houthis are in control. They may let the GPC kind of exist and do stuff, but they're always cracking down on them. They're always restricting their meetings. They're always following them around, that kind of thing. So moving on over to military and security behind the front lines from the Yemeni government perspective, in terms of al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, we did see on 29 July the U.S. State Department increase its public reward for information leading to the death or capture of AQAP Emir Saad al-Awlaki to 10 million. In Taz Governorate, we did see between 29 and I think 31 July, around that period, multiple reported IED attacks. Reported on national resistance forces linked vehicles. So we did see one in Turba, which is kind of a borderland between Islah-controlled areas of Taz City, between a little bit. National resistance forces have historically had some presence there, and to the southeast, STC-aligned forces. I think the Saudi-backed Nation Shield forces are also around there as well. So a lot of different stuff. We also did see reports of an explosion in Mukha, which is more firmly within the National Resistance Forces sort of held areas. So unclear exactly who's responsible for those. In Hadramawt Governorate, we did see on 31 July the Hadramawt Tribal Alliance, which has been kind of hyping up its Hadramawt Protection Forces militia under Amr bin Habrish. The commander of this, the Hadramawt Protection Forces 1st Brigade, actually survived an assassination attempt last week, I believe. So it's caused a lot of Sturm und Drang, caused a lot of sort of contestation. But they recently announced the 1st Brigade, and now they're saying that they're graduating the first batch of HPF recruits, which you can see here pictured on the right. Doesn't seem like that big or well equipped of a force yet. So there's a lot of people make a lot of points about like, oh yeah, this is continuing the fragmentation of society into these paramilitary groups, and that's definitely true. But honestly, based on sort of what I'm seeing here, it doesn't seem all that different from what the HTA was able to mobilize before. It's in terms of qualitatively improved sort of military fighting capability. We'll see. It just doesn't. It's not giving, game changer in terms of fighting on the ground in Hadramawt. That said, there seems to be, more of a Saudi rapprochement with Amr bin Habrish over the course of the last couple months. Maybe they'll throw him more stuff, but that people talking about how the HPF is going to recruit 30,000 people. It just seems a bit far-fetched at this point, but we'll see. So, that's the first batch. Doesn't seem that large, but we shall see. Moving on over to military and security behind the front lines for the Houthis, we did see in Jawf Governorate up near Saudi Arabia on 30 July clashes in the Yatma area that killed 2 Houthi fighters and 2 tribesmen, reportedly after Houthi forces stormed the houses of some locals. That's a particularly restive area for the Houthis. There's often, clashes with them, Houthi fighters in various tribes, linked some of the time with local smuggling from Yemeni government-held areas. So that's more or less baseline. The Mar Governorate, we did see on 1 August, a Houthi leader killed during the storming of a civilian home in Atma. Again, pretty par for the course. Sana'a Governorate, of course, we did see between 2 and 3 August that pro-Yemeni government media report that Houthi forces had surrounded the home of the head of the Houthi-aligned wing of the General People's Congress. The party did split following the death of Ali Abdullah Saleh, actually even before that, into various wings. But he is the head of the Houthi-aligned branch. He's been the head of a Houthi-aligned branch for years. They did reportedly storm a meeting of the GPC Secretariat on 2 August, and then later kidnapped Sadiq Abu Ras. So definitely something to keep an eye on in terms of Houthi repression of political opponents and everything. But so that is worth noting. Moving on over to military and security from the maritime security section or perspective, we did see on 28 July the Houthis publish videos of the Eternity Sea crew So the Eternity Sea was one of the two ships that the Houthis sank in early July 2025. They claim to have rescued 10. So after that sinking, there were 11 missing crew. It was believed that something like maybe 5 of them were dead, 5 of the 11. But according to the Houthis, they rescued 10 of the 11. So in terms of lives saved, that's good. In terms of there are more of this crew alive. That said, they are ostensibly being held hostage or definitely being held in detention by the Houthis in against most international laws. They did publish videos of the crew in which the crew claimed to confess that their ship was actually bound for Eilat port in Israel. It had earlier been said that the ship was bound for Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, but they say that this video purports to show that it was actually heading for Eilat, and the Jeddah thing was just a front. This was viewed by international commentators and human rights organizations as a coerced confession, and so not great there. We did see on 31 July the Houthi-aligned Humanitarian Operations Coordination Center, I believe is what the HOCC, issued a notice for companies visiting Israeli ports saying stay away from Israeli ports, because if any of your ships go to Israeli ports, all of your ships are going to be targeted wherever the Houthis can get them. This is a bureaucratic formalization of the announcement made on 27 July, but the Houthis were enacting their 4th phase of escalation, more or less trying to enact a blockade on Israel, a naval blockade on Israel. And it more or less a return to kind of the level of intensity, not entirely to that level of intensities, because they still aren't targeting US or UK ships. Although it seems maybe like that may be a matter of time before they get back to that and Israel and the US gets dragged in. But yeah, so definitely getting back to the same level of intensity that we saw in 2024. For most of 2025, it had been relatively low. The Houthis hadn't conducted any shipping attacks prior to, I believe, July 2025. So we are revving back up in that arena, unfortunately. Moving on over to the Israel-Houthi conflict, we did see the Houthis claim multiple attacks against Israel between 29 July and 1 August, multiple Palestine 2 missile attacks on Ben Gurion Airport, multiple drone attacks on Tel Aviv, Ashkelon, and the Negev. Israel claimed to have intercepted all of the missiles, and the drones didn't seem to hit their targets. Israel hasn't conducted any airstrikes this week, but we'll see. They did conduct an airstrike on Hadramawt port late last reporting period. So we shall see there. And moving on over to humanitarian and economic issues. In terms of humanitarian affairs, between 27 July and 31 July, the Houthis did organize what they called an expanded humanitarian meeting in Sana'a to discuss obstacles facing humanitarian organizations in Houthi-held areas, ostensibly sort of in the context of massively reduced humanitarian funding, massively reduced humanitarian engagement in Houthi-held areas, both as a result of reduced funding, as a result of the ongoing Houthi persecution of humanitarian aid workers, and U.S. sanctions. So we've seen a drastic pullback with regards to that. One of the major issues addressed by this conference was U.S. sanctions against the International Bank of Yemen had resulted in some way, I believe, the freezing of assets of humanitarian organizations, that kind of thing. We did see the meeting call on the UN to localize a lot of the same stuff that we see from a lot of humanitarian meetings, honestly, localize more, give more resources, etc. A lot of this seems more like a Houthi organized sort of meeting to try to pressure the UN to give more. And frankly, the UN just doesn't have it. UN's not in UN OCHA and everything just isn't in a great position in terms of humanitarian funding right now. And if they were, I don't imagine their priority is Houthi-held areas after everything that the Houthis have done to humanitarian workers over the course of the last year or two. And so, yeah, the Houthis are in a pickle. Ordinary Yemenis are also in a pickle as a result of the reduced humanitarian engagement. Food insecurity is up to historic highs. It's not great. It's not a great situation. Moving on over to displacement, we did see on 30 July Badra Yusuf, one of the last Yemenite Jews in Yemen. So Yemen, for thousands of years, had a very large Jewish population, one of the largest in the Middle East. It was historically up in the mountains of northern Yemen, which is also where the Houthis came from. Over the course of the 20th century, but both through immigration to Israel, but also just within the last couple decades, increasing persecution and anti-Semitism against Yemenite Jews, led in part by people like the Houthis, has seen the last remnants of this. Again, this is a community that dates back to like 2400 or like 400, at least like 0 CE. Like it's a very, very old community, very long history. But yeah, one of the last Yemenite Jews left after her partner died. It was very sad. There are not enough Yemenite Jews left in Yemen to conduct his funeral properly, according to Jewish precepts. So actually, his Muslim neighbors did say that they would bury him and try to sort of honor those wishes. But she immigrated to Israel. She seems to be pretty old in terms of suffering from various illnesses, and her partner died. We did see on 4 July as well, and the other unfortunate incident where boat capsizing resulted in the drowning of at least 55 African migrants off Yemen's coast. This is something that we see, unfortunately, relatively frequently in the waters off Yemen, as it is a major transit point for African migrants trying to go work in the Gulf. Moving on over to humanitarian and economic issues from an infrastructure perspective, we did see on 28 July, the Yemeni government alliance Supreme Sovereignty over Resources Committee discussed challenges regarding the resumption of operations at the Aden refinery. This is something that Prime Minister Salim bin Barak ordered several weeks ago now, if not several months, to try to sort of stimulate fuel production for the local market, that kind of thing. It still seems to be facing challenges. That still is not something that has happened, even though they said that they would be able to get some of those functions online relatively quickly. So they are discussing that. I have seen rumors. I believe that the fuel mafia, as they say, in Yemeni government-held areas was conspiring to stop this refinery from going back online. In terms of port infrastructure, we did see on 30 July the U.S. Treasury sanctioned more than 50 individuals involved in the Shamkhani shipping network. This is an Iran-based shipping network that has shipped Iranian and Russian fuel, netting billions of dollars in revenues for use by Iran and Iran-aligned groups. As you can see, significant portion of them, is based in the UAE, which is kind of at the nexus of the kind of dark fuel position in the Middle East. I think more generally, a lot of the stuff that you see going to Houthi-held ports, I believe, passes through the UAE. So, in terms of its potential knock-on effects on Houthi shipping and fuel networks, we'll see how that goes. The U.S. just recently designated individuals affiliated with the Houthis in a Houthi shipping network in the UAE and Yemen as well. We did see on 2 August the Houthis establish a general authority to manage Salif and Ras Isa ports. This comes, following several airstrikes, waves of airstrikes against these very significant ports in recent months. So, maybe they're trying to, optimize operations, trying to move stuff around it to get that working a little bit more, but we'll see how that goes. In terms of air infrastructure, we did see on 29 July reports that the string of airstrikes conducted by Israel in May 2025 that completely took operations at Sana'a International Airport offline had resulted in shortages or the unavailability of at least 500 medicines in Sana'a and Houthi-held areas because they can't bring them in via airplanes, which is what they would normally do. A lot of people who used to travel for medical treatment abroad from Sana'a also can't leave, and there have reportedly been some deaths as a result of that. And then on 30 July, we did see reports that a UN cargo plane and a civilian plane nearly collided at Sana'a airport due to the absence of a control tower, again, after these Israeli strikes. So in terms of infrastructure, not great in terms of um, operations and everything with regards to that. You're really seeing and feeling the impact of again the explicit targeting of civilian infrastructure by Israel and the United States over the course of the last several months now in Houthi-held areas. Moving on over to humanitarian economic issues from banking and currency, relatively big story, and actually a relatively good story this week. This is not an area of Yemen where you see good news very often. So we started out the week on 28 July with where we saw the CBY audit suspend the licenses of 10 exchange companies. This was seen as a big sort of move by the CBY audit to try to bring, in particular, currency speculators in line. We did see them later in the week also suspend the licenses of an additional 7 companies. And then I believe at another point, I believe at one point they had suspended the licenses for up to 24 companies. But we saw an incredibly dramatic recovery in the Yemeni government Riyal beginning on 30 July. It was hovering at about 2,800, 2,900 Yemeni Riyals to the dollar. Before 30 July. By 30 July, it's at 2,400 of a dollar. So you can see this historic rate of just how high it was getting and how much higher the value, how I guess less the value of the Yemeni Riyal in Yemeni government held areas was compared to the Houthi Riyal. As of 31 July, it had dropped to 2050 to the dollar in Aden. And by 3 August, it was trading at roughly 1,800 Riyals against the dollar. In Aden. So this has caused the Yemeni government to be very aggressive, in particular with prices. So they're saying that because this dramatic decrease, increase in the Yemeni Riyal's value, now everybody needs to bring prices down. And so as I was saying, they instituted a lot of price monitoring. You're having a lot of people go around and close shops that aren't lowering their prices. Traders are a little bit more skittish about this. There are a lot of people that are saying that this isn't going to necessarily hold, that this isn't necessary, that this dramatic appreciation in the value of the Yemeni Riyal isn't going to hold because it's not based on anything substantive in terms of structural economics. Essentially, they're saying like people are responding to the CBY audit stuff in terms of closing down the exchange companies. But at the end of the day, what you're still seeing is the Yemeni government doesn't have the fiscal resources to sort of sustain this level of appreciation, and that if you force us to bring our prices down, we can lose a lot of money. Traders can get really harmed by this. Hayal Saeed Anam, which is a major multinational company operating out a lot in Yemen, has complained about saying like the Yemeni government needs to maintain currency stability before they're forcing everybody to reduce their prices, etc. So this, I mean, it's a good story for ordinary Yemenis in terms of their currency being valued more, which helps with being able to buy imports. But there are serious questions, I think, whether this is going to be sustained. And a lot of that it's difficult to sort of nail down because some of it is based in the real structural economic factors of like the Yemeni government has a 70% deficit and it's not really able to pay salaries, and it's entangled in a lot of stuff, but also there's a significant psychological component. One of the reasons why the Houthi Riyal has been so stable in comparison is that they have for a very long time instituted strict restrictions on being able to withdraw currency and price controls, and like just being very brutal in terms of controlling the prices. And even though the Houthi rate is much lower on nominally than the Riyal, the Yemeni government rate, you're still seeing issues in Yemen in Houthi held areas in terms of lack of purchasing power, even though the rate is much better. So it's more complicated than just these are the two rates, and this one's so much better than the other one. We shall see with regards to that. And speaking of the Houthi aligned authorities, we did see on 31 July the Central Bank of Yemen in Sana'a, which is Houthi aligned, began destroying 200 Riyal banknotes that had been printed by the Yemeni government. This follows the Houthis' announcement that they were printing 200 Riyal banknotes and minting a 50 Riyal coin in recent weeks. So again, continuing that monetary division of Yemen into effectively two separate monetary blocks, which isn't great in terms of long-term stability and unity and all that. But yeah, so that's it for me. Thank you so much for listening. Again, if you want to reach out to me, feel free to reach out at info.nickjbrumfield@gmail.com. But otherwise, I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you so much.